Elena Whitmore looked the most feared mafia boss in Chicago dead in the eye and said, "I want you to father my child." The gun under his coat, the 4 bodies behind his name, the war he was hiding, she knew none of it. She only knew she had 6 months to become a mother and no time left to fall in love first. Adrian Morelli went very still because in 20 years no one had ever asked him for something that wasn't ruled by fear. He should have said no. Saying yes would put her and the baby in the crosshairs of every enemy he had. He said yes anyway. 3 weeks earlier, Elena Whitmore had sat in a doctor's office with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white, and she had listened to a man tell her that the plan she had built her whole life around was over. "I'm going to be honest with you, Elena," Dr. Halstead said, "because I think you're the kind of person who wants the truth more than she wants comfort." "I am." "Then here it is. Your numbers dropped again this quarter, faster than we hoped. If having a biological child matters to you, and I know it does, then the window you thought you had isn't the window you actually have. You don't have years, you have months." Elena did not cry. She had trained herself over 35 years never to cry in a room where another person could see it. Because in her business, the first person to show a soft belly was the first person to get cut open. "Months," she repeated. 6, maybe 8 before I'd say the odds turn against us. "I'm sorry. I know that isn't what you came here to hear." "No," she said. "It isn't." She stood, smoothed the front of her suit, and picked up her bag with the same steadiness she used walking into a courtroom. "Thank you for not lying to me." "Elena." He caught her at the door. "Can I say one more thing off the record?" "You already told me the hard part. What's left? Don't spend the months you have looking for a man to fix this. I've watched 100 women in your chair convince themselves the right husband is going to appear on schedule. Life doesn't run on your calendar. If you want this, there are other ways." She held his eyes for a long moment. "I stopped believing the right husband was going to appear," she said, "the day the last one signed the papers." Out in the car, she did not turn the key. She sat with both hands on the wheel and stared at nothing, and she let herself feel it for exactly 60 seconds, the way she counted breaths before a closing argument. Then she called her sister. "Tell me you're at lunch and not in front of a client," Grace said. "I'm in a parking garage." "That's worse." "What happened?" "Halstead says I'm out of time. If I want a baby of my own, it has to be now, and there is no now. That includes waiting to fall in love with somebody first." There was a silence on the line, and then Grace, who had always been the softer of the two of them, said the thing Elena needed instead of the thing that would have made her feel better. "Okay, so you don't wait. What do you actually want? Forget Daniel, forget the wedding you already paid for once, forget what Mom's going to say. What do you want?" "I want to be somebody's mother," Elena said, and her voice cracked on the last word, just barely, just enough that only her sister would have caught it. "That's the only part I've ever been sure of." "Then be somebody's mother. You don't need a man for that. You need a decision, and you've never in your life had trouble making a decision." Elena laughed, wet and short. "You're supposed to talk me out of the crazy version. When have I ever managed to talk you out of anything?" That night, Elena sat at her kitchen counter with a laptop and a glass of wine. She did not drink, and she read about donors until 3 in the morning. Height, education, eye color. A paragraph the man had written about himself when he was 22 and desperate for the check. Profiles that read like dating apps for people who would never meet. She kept scrolling, and the more she scrolled, the emptier she felt, because a child was not a spreadsheet, and she of all people knew that a contract could not tell you what a person was underneath. By dawn she had made an appointment at the clinic. Her doctor recommended the discreet one on the north side, where the very private and the very wealthy went, and she told herself she would choose the practical way and stop being sentimental about it. Elena Whitmore had built a life out of choosing the practical way. She did not know that the practical way was about to put her in a waiting room with the most dangerous man in Chicago. She noticed him before she noticed anything else in the room, and she could not have said why. He sat by the window with his back to the wall and his eyes on the door. A big man in a plain dark coat holding a paper cup of coffee he never drank. He did not scroll a phone. He did not tap his foot. He was still in a way that most people were never still, the stillness of someone who had learned that stillness kept you alive. An older woman 2 seats down dropped her cane, and it clattered across the floor and rolled under the chairs, and before the woman could even lean forward, the quiet man was up and across the room, bending to retrieve it, handing it back with both hands and a small nod. "There you are, ma'am," he said. "Careful now. These floors are slick." "Oh, thank you, dear. Aren't you kind?" "No trouble." He went back to his seat, and Elena watched the whole thing, and something in her chest loosened that had been clenched for weeks. She did not think that man is dangerous. She thought that man is gentle, and she had no reason on earth to think otherwise. A nurse called her name. Elena spent 40 minutes with a counselor and a consent form, and a wall of frozen possibilities, and the whole time she kept picturing the man by the window bending down for a stranger's cane. And she could not shake the feeling that she was doing this the wrong way, that she was choosing a paragraph on a screen when what she wanted was something you could only know by looking a person in the eye. When she came back out, he was still there. She sat down 2 chairs away, closer than she needed to, and she told herself she was only tired. He glanced at her, then back at the door, then after a moment at her again. "Long morning?" he asked. "Is it that obvious?" "You've got the look. People come out of that back hallway looking like they just got told something they can't undo." His voice was low and even, no rush in it. "For what it's worth, everybody in that hallway is scared. You're not the only one." "And what were you told?" she asked, and immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." "It's all right." He turned the coffee cup in his hands. "I'm here for a friend. Sort of. It's complicated." "Everything about this place is complicated." That earned her the smallest curve of his mouth, not quite a smile. "Adrian," he said, and offered his hand. "Elena." She took it. His hand swallowed hers and was warm and careful, the grip of a man who knew exactly how much strength he had and had trained his whole life to use only a fraction of it. They talked for 20 minutes. It should have been nothing. 2 strangers in a waiting room. But Elena, who spent her days reading people for a living, who could tell a lying witness from an honest one across a courtroom, kept noticing things. She noticed he asked questions and remembered the answers. She noticed he never once looked at his phone. She noticed that when a man in a suit walked into the waiting room and saw Adrian, the man's face went pale and he turned around and walked right back out, and Adrian watched him go with a flat, unreadable expression and then turned back to Elena as if nothing had happened. "Friend of yours?" she asked. "No," Adrian said. "Just somebody who owes somebody." She let it go. She would remember that she let it go. "I have to ask you something," she said, "and it's going to sound strange, and you can absolutely say no." "Those are my favorite kind of questions." She almost laughed. "Do you have children?" Something moved behind his eyes there and gone a shadow crossing water. "No," he said. "I don't." "Do you want them?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I stopped letting myself want things a long time ago," he said. "It's easier that way." Then he looked at her and there was something almost amused in it. "That's a lot of questions for a stranger." "I'm a lawyer. It's a professional condition." She stood because she had nearly said something she was not ready to say, and she needed distance from it. "It was good to meet you, Adrian." "Elena." He said her name like he was memorizing it. "Good luck, whatever you decide back there. For what it's worth, I think you'll be good at it." She stopped. "Good at what?" "Whatever it is you came here to do." He shrugged. "You've got the look of somebody who finishes what she starts." She thought about that all the way home. She thought about it that night, and the next day, and the day after. She sat in front of the donor profiles again and read paragraph after paragraph, and every single one of them was a stranger, and she realized the difference. Adrian was a stranger too. But he was a stranger she had watched. A stranger she had listened to. A stranger who had bent down for an old woman's cane without being asked, and who had told her the truth about being scared. Some part of her. The part that had spent a career deciding which people to trust with everything, had already made a decision she was not ready to admit. What Elena did not know, because she had no way to know, it was who Adrian Morelli actually was. That same afternoon, in the back of a restaurant that had not served a real customer in 6 years, a man named Vincent Russo set a phone down on a table in front of Adrian and said, "The Kavanaughs sent an answer." And, "It's not the answer you wanted." Vincent had been at Adrian's side for 20 years. He was the only man in the city who could deliver bad news to Adrian Morelli and expect to keep breathing. "They think the old man dying makes you soft. They're moving on the docks. They're moving on the north side. They're testing you, Adrian, and every day you don't answer, the more it looks like they're right." Adrian looked at the phone but did not pick it up. "My father's been dead 6 weeks. "I know. 6 weeks, Vince, and they can't even wait for the ground to settle. That's who they are. It's who we are too, or it used to be." Vincent leaned forward. "I've stood next to you a long time. I watched you take this thing over when you were 26, and everybody said you'd be dead by 30. You buried more men than most soldiers. You did what had to be done, and you never flinched. So I'm going to ask you something, and I've earned the right to ask it. What's going on with you? Because for 6 weeks, it's like you've been somewhere else." Adrian was quiet. Then he said, "Do you ever think about the fact that we don't leave anything behind? What? Men like us. We spend our whole lives holding onto a thing so hard our hands bleed. And then we die and somebody younger and hungrier takes it, and in 10 years, nobody remembers our names. My father had this whole city afraid of him. You know what he left behind? A garden his wife planted that he never once watered, and me." Adrian finally picked up the phone and turned it over in his hand. "That's it. That's the whole inheritance. Fear and a dead woman's roses." Vincent studied him for a long moment. "You're scaring me, boss." "I'm not going soft. Tell the Kavanaughs I got their message. Tell them the answer's coming. But I'm choosing when, not them." He handed the phone back. "And Vince, there's something I have to take care of. Personal. It's going to take some of my time in the next few months, and I don't want questions about it." "What kind of something?" "The kind you don't ask about." Vincent held up both hands. "You're the boss. I'm the boss." Adrian agreed, and there was something tired in the way he said it, something that had been tired for a very long time. The reason Adrian Morelli had been sitting in that fertility clinic was not the reason Elena thought, and it was not the reason he had given her, and it was a secret that could burn everything down. But that afternoon, driving home through a city that flinched when it heard his name, he found himself thinking about a lawyer with steady hands who had asked him if he wanted children, and who had not once in 20 minutes looked at him like she was afraid. Nobody had looked at Adrian Morelli without fear in 20 years. 4 days later, Elena did the most reckless thing she had ever done, and she did it with a folder and a rehearsed speech and a heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. She had gone back to the clinic. She had told herself she was going to choose a donor and be done with it. And she had found him there again, in the same seat, by the same window, holding the same untouched coffee, and she had walked straight up to him before she could talk herself out of it. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Not here. Somewhere I can say something out loud without a waiting room hearing it." He looked at her for a long moment, and then he stood. "There's a diner across the street. Nobody there listens to anything but the coffee." They sat in a corner booth. She ordered nothing. He ordered 2 coffees and drank neither. And then she slid the folder across the table and said the words she had practiced in the mirror for a week. "I want you to father my child. No marriage, no money, no strings." Adrian did not react the way she expected. He did not laugh. He did not look at her like she was crazy. He set down the cup he was not drinking, and he went very still, and he looked at her with an expression she could not read. "Say that again," he said quietly. "You heard me. I want to be sure I heard you." Elena's hands were steady, even though everything inside her was shaking. "I'm 35. I found out 3 weeks ago I've got maybe 6 months to have a child that's biologically mine. I've spent every night since then reading profiles of men I'll never meet, and I can't do it. I can't choose a stranger off a screen. And then I met you, and I watched you. I watched you pick up an old woman's cane, and I watched you tell me the truth about being scared, and I'm a lawyer, Adrian. Reading people is the whole job. And I have never in my life read a person the way I read you across that waiting room. She took a breath. I don't want a relationship. I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you except this one impossible thing. And I know how it sounds. You don't know anything about me, he said. It was not a rejection, it was a warning, and she did not hear it as one. I know you're kind when you think nobody's watching, she said. That's the only thing that can't be faked. Everything else a person can lie about. Not that. Adrian looked down at the folder. He did not open it. And then he said something that would have made every man who feared him fall out of his chair, because Adrian Morelli, who had not answered to anyone since he was 26 years old, said, "Why me? You could have any man in this city." I don't want any man in this city, Elena said. I want a good one. And I've met a lot of powerful people who dressed up as good ones. You're the first one I've met who dressed up as nothing at all. Something happened in his face then. A crack in a wall that had been standing for 2 decades. He looked for one unguarded second, like a man who had just been handed a thing he had told himself he was not allowed to want. Then the wall came back up. There are things about me you'd need to know, he said. Things that would change your answer. Then tell me. Not today. Adrian. Elena. He leaned forward, and for the first time she felt something come off of him that she had not felt before. Not fear exactly, but a weight, a sense of a man carrying something enormous. You just asked me the most honest question anybody's asked me in 20 years. I'm not going to answer it with a lie. So I'm going to say yes to thinking about it, and I'm going to say no to answering it tonight, because if I'm going to do this, you're going to walk into it with your eyes open. Do you understand me? Eyes open. That's my only condition. That's not a no? No, he said. It's not a no. And that was the moment. That was the moment Elena Whitmore, who planned everything, who controlled everything, who had built a fortress of a life, so that nothing could ever surprise her again, chose a man she knew nothing about to be the father of her only child. She reached across the table and shook his hand to seal it, and his hand swallowed hers, warm and careful, and she felt safe. She had never in her life been in more danger. They agreed to meet again. They agreed to lawyers' contracts, the boring machinery of an arrangement that was anything but boring. Elena drove home lighter than she had felt in weeks, actually humming, and she called her sister and said, I found him. I found the right one. And Grace said, Found who? And Elena laughed and said, I'll explain when I know how to explain it. Adrian did not drive home light. Adrian sat in his car outside the diner for a long time, and then he called Vincent. I need you to look into somebody for me, he said. Quietly, Elena Whitmore, attorney, downtown firm. I want to know everything about her, and I want to know if anybody else has been looking too. You want a background on a lawyer? What's this about, boss? It's the personal thing, just do it. And Vince, this one's sealed. Nobody else touches it. Not one other person hears her name. Consider it done. A pause. Boss, should I be worried? Adrian watched the diner window, where a woman he had known for 4 days had just handed him a reason to want to live longer than his father had. Yeah, he said. You should, but not for the reason you think. What neither of them knew was that a car had been parked across the street the entire time. Inside it, a man with a phone had taken a photograph of Adrian Morelli walking out of a diner with a woman and had sent it to a number in a contact list saved under a single name. The name was Kavanaugh. And underneath the photograph, the man had typed 3 words that would set everything that was coming into motion. He typed, Morelli has someone. Elena went to sleep that night believing she had finally taken control of her future. She dreamed for the first time in months of a child. She did not dream of the man in the parked car because she did not know he existed, and she did not dream of the war she had walked into because she did not know there was one. But somewhere across the city, a phone lit up in the dark, and a man named Declan Kavanaugh looked at a photograph of a woman he had never met, and he smiled the smile of a man who had just been handed a weakness he had spent 6 weeks hunting for. "Well now," he said softly to no one. "Isn't that interesting?" And in his own apartment, in a building most people would have been surprised to learn, a man like him lived in Adrian Morelli, stood at a window, and looked out at the city that feared him, and he thought about a folder he had not opened, and a question he had not answered, and a secret he had not told. And for the first time in 20 years, the most dangerous man in Chicago felt something that was not power, and was not control, and was not fear. He felt hope. And in his world, hope was the most dangerous thing of all, because hope was a thing his enemies could take away. He did not yet know how close they already were. He only knew that a woman with steady hands had looked at him without flinching, and that he had said, "It's not a no." And that somewhere in that diner, without meaning to, he had started to want a future. He picked up the folder she had left with him. He ran his thumb along the edge of it. And then, alone in the dark, Adrian Morelli did something he had not done since he was a boy. Standing over a coffin he was too young to understand. He let himself imagine it. A small hand in his enormous one. A first cry. A reason. Then he set the folder down, and he picked up the phone, because there was a war coming whether he wanted one or not, and men were waiting on his word, and the boy who imagined things and the man who buried them were the same man and had always been the same man, and that was the whole tragedy of Adrian Morelli. "Vince," he said, "change of plan. Everything I said about taking my time, forget it. I want the Kavanaughs handled fast, and I want it clean before this gets bigger than us. I've got a reason now to make sure this city is quiet." "What changed?" Adrian looked at the folder on the table. "I did," he said. And he hung up, and he stood in the dark a while longer. A man who had just been given the one thing he had never allowed himself and did not yet know it would cost him everything before he was allowed to keep it. Across town, Elena slept and smiled in her sleep, and had no idea that the safest she had ever felt was standing at the exact edge of the most dangerous thing she would ever do. The contracts came together over the following week, and Elena handled them the way she handled everything, with precision and a red pen and a refusal to leave anything to chance. She drafted an agreement so airtight that her own colleague reviewing it whistled and said, "Whoever this guy is, he's not getting a nickel out of you, and he's not getting a Sunday visit either. This is the coldest thing you've ever written." "That's the point," Elena said. "It's supposed to be clean, no feelings, nothing to fight over later." "Uh-huh." Her colleague slid the pages back. "You know what's funny? In 15 years, I've never seen you draft anything this careful. You only get this careful about the things you're scared of losing control over." Elena did not answer that. She met Adrian at the diner again, the corner booth becoming theirs without either of them naming it. He read the contract slowly, page by page, and she watched him read, and she noticed he was not skimming, he was actually reading the way a man reads something he intends to honor. "You thought of everything," he said finally. "I always do." "No." He tapped a clause. "You didn't think of one thing. You wrote 3 pages about what happens if I ever try to see the child. You didn't write a single word about what happens if you change your mind and want me to." Elena went still. "Why would I want that?" "You wouldn't. Probably." He signed his name at the bottom, a slow, deliberate signature. "I just noticed you protected yourself from every version of the future except that one. People usually leave a door open exactly where they're not admitting they want one. That's very psychological for a man who buys people coffee he doesn't drink." He looked up, and there was that almost smile again. "You noticed that. I notice everything. It's a professional condition, remember?" She took the signed contract back. "Why don't you drink it?" "The coffee. You order 2 every time. You never touch either one." Adrian was quiet a moment. "My father used to say a man should always have something in front of him he's not touching. Makes people think you're comfortable. Comfortable men are the ones nobody worries about." He shrugged. "Old habit. That's a strange thing for a father to teach a son." He was a strange man. Something closed in his face. He's dead now. 6 weeks. I'm sorry. Don't be. He wasn't a good man, Elena. I'll tell you that much for free since you're about to tie yourself to my blood. My father was not a good man, and I spent my whole life being what he needed me to be. He met her eyes. That's the closest I can come to the truth right now. I need you to hear it even if you don't understand it yet. She heard it. She filed it away. She did not understand it, not the way she would come to. Everybody's got a father they had to survive, she said gently. Mine wasn't a good man either. It doesn't have to be your inheritance. Something moved across his face that was almost grief. I hope you're right, he said. For the kid's sake, I hope you're right. That was the first crack. The first time Elena felt the ground under this arrangement shift from a contract into something with a pulse. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself she had built the whole thing precisely so that a moment like this could not turn into more than a moment. She was already lying to herself, and she was very good at spotting liars, and she did not spot this one. Adrian walked her to her car that night. It was the kind of thing that meant nothing, and the kind of thing that meant everything. And as they crossed the street, Elena did not see the second car, the one that pulled slowly away from the curb, the moment they stepped outside the one with a man inside it who lifted a phone and photographed them one more time. But Adrian saw it. Adrian had been trained since boyhood to see exactly that car. His whole body changed for half a second, a coiling of readiness, and then he forced it down because Elena was beside him and Elena could not know. Everything okay? She asked, because she was a person who noticed things too. Fine, he said, and his voice was easy, and it was the first outright lie he had told her. Drive safe, Elena. Text me when you're home. You want me to text you when I'm home? That's very not our arrangement. Humor me. She drove home. She texted him. He read it and did not answer because he was already on the phone with Vincent, and his voice was not easy anymore. His voice was ice. Somebody's watching her, Adrian said. Somebody photographed us tonight and I made him for a Kavanaugh soldier. I want to know how long they've been on her. I want to know what they know, and Vince listened to me very carefully. Nothing happens to her. Nothing. You put people around her that she'll never see, and if anybody so much as slows down near her, you handle it before it becomes a problem. Do you understand? Boss, who is this woman? You put a wall around her and you won't tell me why. Adrian looked out his window at the city that feared his name. The city that did not know its most dangerous man had just spent the evening reading a contract about a baby and drinking no coffee and lying to a woman for the first time to keep her safe. She's the mother of my child, Adrian said quietly. The silence on the line was total. Adrian, Vincent said, finally very carefully, you don't have a child. Adrian closed his eyes. Not yet, he said. And in that not yet was every hope he had ever buried, and every enemy he had ever made colliding at last, and somewhere across the city, a man named Declan Kavanaugh was looking at 2 photographs of a woman with steady hands, learning her name, learning her address, learning that the most feared man in Chicago had finally, after 20 untouchable years, given the world something he could not bear to lose. Elena fell asleep believing she was safe. She had never been in more danger in her life. The clinic called on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday it was done, and Elena sat in her car in the same parking garage where she had learned she was out of time. And this time she did cry because the thing she had believed was over had just quietly medically begun. She called Adrian first. She noticed that she called him first before Grace, before anyone, and she did not let herself think about what that meant. It worked, she said. It took. I'm pregnant. There was a silence on the line so long she thought the call had dropped. Adrian, I'm here. His voice was rough, unsteady, in a way she had never heard from him. Say it again. You're going to be a father. Technically, on paper, according to a contract that says you have no rights and no obligations and no Sunday visits. She was laughing and crying at the same time, the way a person does when a thing they stopped believing in comes true. I'm pregnant, Adrian. Are you okay? Are you safe? Do you need anything? I need nothing. That's the whole arrangement, remember? You don't owe me a thing. Elena. He said it low. Ask me for something. Just once. I want to know what it feels like when you ask me for something. She should have said no. The contract she had drafted with her own red pen said no. Instead, she said, "Come to the first appointment, the one where we hear the heartbeat. You don't have to, but if you want to hear it, you can come." "I'll be there," he said, before she finished the sentence. That was the beginning of the part neither of them had signed for, because Adrian did not just come to the first appointment, he came to all of them. He sat in the waiting room by the window in the same seat holding the same untouched coffee, and when the nurse called Elena's name, he stood without being asked and walked in beside her. And the first time they heard the heartbeat, that fast, wet gallop filling the little room. Elena watched the most dangerous man in Chicago put a hand over his mouth and turn away so she would not see his face. "You okay?" she asked. "That's fast," he said when he could talk. "Is it supposed to be that fast?" "That's how they sound. Little and fast. Little and fast," he repeated like he was memorizing it, the way he had memorized her name in the diner. They should have stopped there. The arrangement was working. She was healthy, the baby was healthy, and Adrian had honored every line of the contract to the letter. He never asked for more than she offered. He never pushed. But he kept showing up, and she kept letting him, and somewhere between the second appointment and the fifth, the corner booth at the diner became a standing thing twice a week. No agenda, just two people who had accidentally built a life together, sitting across from each other while one of them drank coffee and the other one didn't. "You're going to have to explain the coffee eventually," she said one night. "You're going to have to explain why you keep inviting a man with no rights to dinner," he said back. "It's not dinner. You never eat. Neither do you. You order tea and move it around the cup." She laughed. "We're a couple of frauds, aren't we? Two people pretending to have coffee, pretending it's an arrangement." The word couple sat in the air between them, and neither of them touched it, and both of them noticed. What Elena did not know, what she could not have known, was that every one of those dinners was guarded. That Vincent had put 4 men in rotation around her, that she had been photographed leaving her office, and followed home, and watched at her own front door every single night for weeks. Not by Adrian's enemies now, but by Adrian's men, a wall she never saw. She thought she was living an ordinary life. She was living inside a fortress that a man had built around her without asking permission, because the alternative was a nightmare he could not say out loud. Because the man in the parked car had not gone away. Declan Kavanaugh had a name now. He had an address. He had watched a woman go to a fertility clinic and come out glowing. Watched her have dinner twice a week with the man who had made his family bleed for a generation. And Declan Kavanaugh, who was patient. The way a spider is patient, had begun to understand exactly what he was looking at. "He's not sleeping with her," Declan said to his brother over a table in a room across town that mirrored the one where Adrian met Vincent, because the two families were more alike than either would ever admit. "That's the strange part. My people say there's no romance, no touching, nothing, just dinners, just the doctor." "So she's nothing. Drop it." "No." Declan turned a photograph in his hands, the one of Adrian coming out of the diner with a woman. "You don't put a wall around nothing. He's got 4 men on her. 4. Morelli doesn't spend 4 men on a woman he doesn't care about. And a fertility clinic, Sean. A fertility clinic." He set the photo down. "She's carrying his kid. That's the only thing that explains all of it. The most careful man in this city just did the one careless thing. He made himself something to lose. Then we take it," Sean said. "Not yet." Declan's smile was slow. "You don't waste a thing like this. You don't grab it the first day. You wait. You let it grow. You let him fall all the way in until the thing is so far inside him that when you finally reach for it, you're not taking a hostage. You're taking his heart out through his chest." He leaned back. "We wait until it matters most. And then we don't ask him for money. We ask him for everything." Adrian felt it before he could name it. That was the thing about a man raised the way Adrian was raised in a world where the wrong instinct got you killed at 19. He had an animal sense for being hunted, and for weeks now, the back of his neck had been telling him something was wrong. Nothing he could point to. No move made. Just a stillness in the city that was too still, the quiet of a predator that had decided to wait. "They're not doing anything," Vincent said. "That's what worries me. The Kavanaughs pushed the docks, pushed the north side, and then 6 weeks ago they just stopped. Went quiet. Declan doesn't go quiet. Declan goes quiet when he's got something better cooking." "They know," Adrian said. "We don't have proof of that." "I don't need proof, Vince. I've known Declan Kavanaugh my whole life. He grabs when he's weak and he waits when he's strong. He's waiting. That means he thinks he's holding a winning hand." Adrian's jaw tightened. "And the only card I've got worth waiting for is her." Vincent was quiet a long moment. "Then end it," he said finally. "The arrangement, whatever this is. If she's the thing that gets her hurt, then the kindest thing you could ever do for that woman is walk away from her right now, before Declan is sure. Cut it off. Disappear. Let her raise the kid alone and safe. You gave her the one thing she wanted. Now give her the second thing. Give her distance." It was good advice. It was the right advice. Adrian knew it was the right advice. "I can't," he said. "Boss, I said I can't." And there it was, out loud for the first time. Adrian put his head in his hands, this enormous man folding down over a table, and he said, the thing he had not said to himself. "I sat in that room, and I heard the heartbeat, Vince, little and fast. And for the first time in my whole life, I wanted something that wasn't power and wasn't revenge and wasn't survival. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be a father. Not on paper. For real. And I know what that makes me. It makes me exactly what Declan's been hunting for. It makes me weak." He looked up. "But I can't walk away from the first good thing I've ever had. I don't have it in me. So we don't run. We fight. We end the Kavanaughs before they end this. That's a war. Then it's a war." But Adrian did not tell Elena. That was the mistake that would nearly cost him everything, and he made it for the oldest reason in the world. He told himself he was protecting her. He told himself that a woman 5 months pregnant did not need to know that men were watching her house, that a war was gathering, that the father of her child was the most hunted man in Chicago. He told himself she would leave if she knew, and that leaving would not make her safer. It would only make her a target with no wall around her. Every one of those things was partly true, and all of them together were a lie he told so he would not lose her. So he kept coming to dinner, and he kept his face easy, and he lied to her twice a week with his whole heart. "You're somewhere else tonight," Elena said at the diner, watching him. "You've been somewhere else for a couple of weeks now. Long stretch at work. What is it you do exactly?" "You've never told me." His face did not change, and that was how she should have known, because a person whose face does not change when the ground drops out is a person who has practiced. "Import business," he said. "Logistics. Boring. Boxes on and off boats." "Boxes on and off boats," she repeated. "And that's why a man in a suit turned white and walked out of a waiting room the first day I met you." Adrian went still. "You remember that. I told you. I notice everything." She set down the tea she wasn't drinking. "Adrian, I'm not a fool. I've built my career on knowing when a man across a table is telling me half of something. You're telling me half of something. You've been telling me half of something since the first day, and I let it go because it wasn't my business, because all I wanted was the one thing, and you gave me the one thing. But I'm carrying your child, and I'm starting to think the half you're not telling me is the half that matters." This was the moment. He could have told her. Everything in him wanted to tell her this woman who read people for a living who had chosen him because she thought she could see what he was underneath. And the terrible irony was that she had seen exactly right. She had seen the good man. She had just had no idea what the good man was made of. "Elena," he said. And he stopped. "Say it," she said quietly. "Whatever it is. I'm harder to scare than you think." And he almost did. He got as far as opening his mouth. And then his phone buzzed against the table, and he glanced at it out of 20 years of reflex, and it was Vincent. And the message was 4 words, and the 4 words were, "They moved on Grace." Everything in Adrian's body went cold and clear and lethal in the space of a single heartbeat. "I have to go," he said, already standing, already reaching for his coat, and his voice was different. It was a voice Elena had never heard, flat and fast, and absolutely certain the voice of the man she did not know he was. "Adrian, what's wrong? You just went white." "Work emergency. I'm sorry. I have to go right now." He put money on the table without counting it far too much. "Go straight home. Don't stop anywhere. Text me the second you're inside and lock the door. Please, I'll explain. I promise I'll explain, but not tonight." "Adrian, you're scaring me." "Good," he said. And he was gone. And it was the second time he had said good to her being scared. And this time she understood it was not a joke, and she sat alone in the booth with her hand pressed flat against the small curve of her belly, and felt for the first time that she had chosen a stranger after all. Grace was fine. That was the first thing Adrian made sure of, and it was the only mercy in the whole night. Declan had not touched her. He had done something worse and smarter. He had let his people be seen. A car outside Grace's house. A man who followed her from the grocery store, and then when she noticed him tipped an imaginary hat and walked away. No harm done. A message. Declan Kavanaugh reaching out and touching the thing Adrian loved gently just once, just to say, "I know. I know what you have. I know where it lives. And I can reach it whenever I want." "He's telling us he knows about her whole family," Vincent said. They were in the back room and Adrian had not sat down. Adrian was standing over the table with both hands flat on it, and a stillness in him that his men had learned to be more afraid of than his rage. "The sister, probably the parents next. He's mapping everyone she loves. He's showing you the whole board. He wants me to know he can reach all of them." "Yeah. He wants me scared." "Are you?" Adrian looked up, and there was nothing in his face at all. And that was the most frightening thing Vincent had seen in 20 years of standing beside him. "No," Adrian said quietly. "I'm past scared. Scared is when there's still a question. There's no question anymore." He straightened. "Put a wall around the sister, the parents, everyone. Tonight. I don't care what it costs or how many men it takes. That's most of our people, boss. We spread that thin, we're exposed everywhere else. Then we're exposed. Do it." Adrian picked up his coat. "And reach out to Declan. Set a meeting. Neutral ground. I want to look him in the face. He'll say no. He'll say yes. He's been waiting 6 weeks for me to come to him. That's the whole point. He wants me to come asking. So I'll go. And I'll find out what he wants." Adrian's hand closed hard around the coat. "And then I'll figure out how to kill him for it." Elena texted him from inside her locked apartment. "Home. Safe. Doors locked. Now you tell me what's happening." He looked at the message for a long time. And then he did the thing he would come to regret more than anything he had ever done, which was that he typed back a lie. "Work crisis handled. Sorry I scared you. Everything's fine. See you Thursday." He almost believed sending it that he was protecting her. He was not protecting her. He was buying himself time. He was choosing the version of the future where he got to keep coming to dinner over the version where he told her the truth, and she took his child and vanished into a life without him. He knew it somewhere underneath. He knew exactly what he was doing. And he did it anyway, because Adrian Morelli had spent his whole life surviving, and a man who has only ever survived does not know how to do the brave thing when the brave thing is honesty. Elena read his text 3 times. Everything's fine. She was a woman who had spent 15 years catching people in exactly this kind of lie, the too smooth reassurance, the closed door dressed up as an open one. And she knew, holding the phone hand on her belly, that Adrian Morelli was lying to her. She just didn't know about what. "I'm going to find out who he is," she told Grace the next morning, because Elena did not sit in fear. Elena investigated. Something's wrong. Something's been wrong for weeks. He went white at the table last night and told me to run home and lock my door, and then he texted me 2 hours later that everything's fine. Nobody does that. Nobody tells you to barricade yourself in and then says it's nothing. L. Grace's voice was strange on the phone. Somebody followed me yesterday. From the store. A man. He tipped his hat at me when I noticed him. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to scare you in your condition, but you're already scared, so somebody followed me. Elena went very still. What did he look like? I don't know. Big, cheap suit. Why, Elle, you're doing the quiet thing you do right before you take somebody apart in court. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Elena said slowly, that I chose a man off nothing but a feeling in a waiting room, and I told myself the feeling was enough, and I never once looked into who he actually is. And I'm thinking that was the stupidest thing a smart woman has ever done. She was already at her computer, already typing, already being the person she was, which was a person who found things out. Adrian Morelli, import business, logistics. Let's see how boring boxes on and off boats really is. It took her 40 minutes. It took her 40 minutes to find the first newspaper article and the second and the photograph of a federal building and a name she now knew, Morelli, and the word underneath it that made the tea rise in her throat. Organized crime. She found a decade of it. She found a man who had been questioned in connection with things she made herself read all the way through, even as her hands started to shake. She found the family name attached to the docs to disappearances, to a father who had died 6 weeks ago, 6 weeks, and a son who had taken over, and she sat in her chair with her child inside her, and understood finally completely what she had done. She had not chosen a lonely, gentle stranger. She had chosen the most dangerous man in Chicago, and she had put his blood inside her body, and men in cheap suits were following her sister through grocery stores, and everything's fine was the biggest lie anyone had ever told her. The phone rang in her hand. It was him. Adrian, the screen said, and there was a photograph she had taken of him at the diner, without him knowing, a rare shot of him almost smiling. She let it ring. She watched it ring. And when it stopped, she set the phone down very carefully on the desk, and she put both hands flat on either side of it. And Elena Whitmore, who did not cry where people could see, cried alone in her apartment for the child she was carrying, whose father she had just discovered was a monster the whole city was afraid of. Then she stopped crying, because that was who she was. And she picked the phone back up and she called him, and when he answered, breathless, relieved, "Elena, thank God I've been calling." She said the words in the flat, dead-level voice she used to end a man's testimony. "I know who you are." Silence. "Adrian, I know who you are. I found the articles. I found your father. I found the docs and the disappearances and the word they keep using next to your name. I found all of it in 40 minutes because I'm good at my job, and because it turns out you're not actually that hard to find once someone stops trusting you." Her voice did not shake. She would not let it shake. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me the truth. All of it. Right now. Or I take my child, and I disappear so far and so completely that not you, not the men following my sister, not anyone ever finds either one of us again. And you know I can do it. You know I'm good enough to do it. Elena." "The truth. Adrian, is my sister being followed because of you?" The silence that came back was the worst thing she had ever heard, because it was an answer. "Yes," he said finally, and his voice broke on the single word. And she hated that even now, even knowing everything, part of her heard the breaking and wanted to reach for him. "Yes, she's being followed because of me. And so are you. And so are your parents. And I've had men around all of you for weeks protecting you because there's a man in this city who found out what you are to me, and he's been waiting to use you against me." He was talking fast now, all of it coming out the wall, finally down. "I should have told you. I know I should have told you. I told myself I was protecting you, but the truth is, I was protecting me, because the second you knew, I knew you'd run, and I couldn't stand to lose the first thing I've ever—" "Don't!" Her voice cut like a blade. Don't you dare tell me what I am to you. You lost the right to have feelings about me the moment you put my child in a war and didn't tell me. Do you understand? I asked you. I sat across from you last night, and I asked you to tell me, and I said I was harder to scare than you think, and you looked me in the eye and you said, import business. I know. You knew there were men following my sister, and you told me everything was fine. I know, Elena, I know. There's no excuse, and I'm not going to build one. You're right about all of it. And that somehow was worse than if he had defended himself, because a man who defends himself you can argue with, and a man who simply agrees that he has failed you leaves you nowhere to put the rage. Tell me what you need. Anything. If you want to run, I'll make it happen. I'll build you a life so clean and so buried that not even I can find you, and I'll never look, I swear to God, I'll never look. If that's what keeps you and the baby safe, I'll do it tonight. Just tell me. And there it was. The thing that undid her. The thing that made this impossible. Because a monster would have threatened her. A monster would have used his power to keep her, would have reminded her that she was carrying his blood, would have made her afraid. And Adrian, the most dangerous man in Chicago, a man who could make people disappear, was offering to disappear her from himself. Was offering to give up his own child forever if that was the price of her safety. That was not what a monster did. That was what a father did. And Elena Whitmore sat in her chair with her hand on her belly and understood that the situation was so much worse than a monster because she had not been wrong about him in the waiting room. She had seen the good man. The good man was real. The good man had bent down for an old woman's cane and put a hand over his mouth at a heartbeat and was right now offering to erase himself from her life to keep her safe. The good man was also somehow the same man the whole city feared. Both were true. That was the thing she could not fit inside her chest. Both were completely true. I need to think, she said, and her voice finally broke. Don't call me. Don't send your men to my door. Don't do anything. I need to think, and I can't do it with you talking. Do you understand? I understand. Adrian. She stopped. She hadn't meant to say his name. Is the baby in danger right now tonight? The truth. I'll know if you lie, I always know now, so don't. Right now tonight with my men around you know, he said. You're the most protected woman in this city. That's the truth. But I won't lie to you again, so I'll tell you the rest. As long as you're connected to me, the danger doesn't go away. It only sleeps. The only way it truly ends is if I end the man who's hunting you. Or if you disappear so completely that you were never connected to me at all. A pause. Those are the only two doors, Elena. I wish there were a third. There isn't. She hung up without answering, because there was nothing to say to a truth that terrible. She sat alone for a long time, and then she did the thing she had done her whole life, the thing that had saved her from every man who had ever tried to break her. She stopped feeling, and she started thinking. She was a lawyer. She had been handed an impossible case with a client she could not walk away from because the client was her own child, and she was going to do what she always did. She was going to read every angle until she found the door that no one else could see. She did not sleep. She sat up all night with a legal pad, and she wrote down everything she knew, and she made columns the way she did before a trial, and at 4 a.m. she stopped writing and stared at the pad and understood something that made her blood run cold. Adrian had said there were only two doors. Run or let him kill the man hunting her. But Elena had spent 15 years finding the third door in rooms full of people who swore there were only two. And staring at her legal pad in the dark, she saw it. She saw a door neither Adrian nor his enemy had thought of, because both of them thought like men who solved things with fear, and Elena did not solve things with fear. She solved them the way a lawyer does. She picked up her phone. She did not call Adrian. She scrolled back through weeks of messages until she found the one thing she had saved without knowing why a name Adrian had said once at dinner, and she had written down out of habit because she wrote everything down. Declan Kavanaugh and Elena Whitmore, 35 years old, 5 months pregnant, betrayed and terrified, and more clear-headed than she had ever been in her life, looked at that name and did the single most dangerous thing anyone in this entire story had done yet. She started figuring out how to reach him herself. Because if the man hunting her wanted to use her against Adrian, then he thought of her as a thing, a piece, a weakness to be grabbed. And every person who had ever made the mistake of thinking Elena Whitmore was a weakness had learned far too late exactly how wrong they were. She was done being the thing men fought over. She was going to sit down across a table from the man who wanted to destroy her child's father, and she was going to find out what he wanted, and then she was going to do the thing she did better than anyone alive. She was going to make a deal. She just didn't know yet that the deal Declan Kavanaugh actually wanted was one no contract in the world could hold, and that by reaching for him herself, she had just done the one thing that would take the war out of Adrian's hands and put it fully and finally into her own. She set the phone down. She looked out at the city that was afraid of the father of her child. For the first time, the city should have been afraid of her. Reaching Declan Kavanaugh turned out to be easier than Elena expected, and that should have been her first warning because in her experience, the dangerous men were always the easy ones to reach. They wanted to be found. They left doors open on purpose. She did it through a paralegal at her own firm, a young man named Petey, whose uncle owned a bar on the south side that Elena had once helped keep its liquor license, and she did it carefully, one quiet question at a time, until a message went up a chain she could not see and came back down with a time and a place and a single instruction. Come alone. Tell no one. Especially not him. She told no one, especially not him. She left her phone at home because she knew Adrian's men would track it, and she took a car service 2 towns over, and then a second one back, doubling herself the way she'd read about in 100 depositions. And she walked into a restaurant that had not served a real meal in years, and sat down across from a man who smiled at her like they were old friends. "Elena Whitmore," Declan Kavanaugh said, "you're braver than I gave you credit for. I've been trying to figure out for weeks how to get you in a room, and here you walk in on your own 2 feet. He spread his hands. "You have to admire that. Morelli never came to me. He sent for me. And here's his woman walking in the front door. Says a lot about which one of you has more nerve." "I'm not his woman." "No." Declan tilted his head. "Then what are you?" "I'm the mother of his child," Elena said. "And that's the only thing about me that concerns you. So let's not pretend either of us is here for the company. You want to use me against him. You've been circling my family for weeks. So let's skip the part where you charm me and get to the part where you tell me what you actually want, because I came here to make a deal and I don't have all day." Declan laughed, delighted. "Oh, he found himself a sharp one. That's the tragedy of it, really. If you'd chosen anybody else in this city to father your baby, you'd be nobody to me. You'd be safe. You made yourself a target the day you sat down in that diner." He leaned forward. "Do you know what your Adrian did to my family?" "I know he's a criminal. I found that out 3 days ago." "A criminal?" Declan repeated it like the word amused him. "That's a clean little word for it. Let me give you a less clean one." And he told her. He told her about a war 20 years old between 2 families and about the things Adrian's father had done, and then about the things Adrian himself had done when he took over. And Elena sat and listened with her lawyer's face on the face that gave nothing away, even as some of what he said made her stomach turn, because a good interrogator lets the other side talk. And Declan Kavanaugh clearly did not get to talk about his grief very often. "He took my brother," Declan said finally, and for the first time, the performance dropped and something real and terrible showed underneath. 8 years ago, my older brother, Adrian Morelli, put my brother in the ground, and he did it clean, and he did it smart, and there was never a body, and never a case, and never a single day he spent afraid of paying for it. 8 years I've been waiting. And then his father dies, and he goes soft, and he walks into a fertility clinic and hands me the one thing I've been waiting for." He looked at her, and his eyes were wet, and Elena understood that this was the most dangerous kind of man there is, the kind whose evil is made entirely of grief. You, his weakness, the thing he'll trade the world for. "So this is revenge. This is balance," Declan said. "He took someone I loved. Now he loves someone. You see how it works. The universe finally handed me the tool." Elena kept her face still. Inside her mind was moving fast, the way it moved in a courtroom, when a witness said something that changed the whole shape of the case. Because she had come here believing Declan wanted power or territory or money, the things men fought over, the things you could put in a contract. And a man who wants those things you can deal with. You find what he'll trade for. But a man who wants a dead brother back is a man who cannot be dealt with because the only currency he accepts is pain, and Elena had nothing to offer him but her own. She had made a terrible miscalculation, and she knew it the instant she understood him. "You didn't come here to deal," Declan said, watching her face because he read people too. "You came here thinking you could. You thought I wanted something you could give me, and now you're sitting there realizing I don't want anything you have. I only want what you are to him." He smiled, gentle, awful. "You walked into my hands, Elena. You saved me a great deal of trouble." Elena stood up. Her legs were steadier than they had any right to be. "You're not going to touch me," she said. "And I'll tell you why. Not because of Adrian. Because of you. You've waited 8 years to do this clean and smart the way you say he did it to your brother. Grabbing a pregnant woman in a restaurant in front of your own people is not clean and it is not smart. It's the thing a man does when he's out of patience. And you're not out of patience, Declan. You've got all the patience in the world. That's the only thing that's kept me alive walking in here." She picked up her bag. "So you'll let me walk out, and you'll go back to waiting for the perfect moment, because that's who you are, and a man never stops being who he is, not even to get the thing he wants most." For a long moment, Declan Kavanaugh just looked at her. Then he began slowly to applaud. "Magnificent," he said. "Truly, he does not deserve you." He gestured and no one moved to stop her. "Go on then, walk out. You're right, I'll wait. I'm very good at waiting. But, Elena..." His voice followed her to the door. "Ask him about the woman. Before you decide he's worth all this. Ask Adrian about the woman he loved before you and the child, and what happened to them. Ask him why a man like that walked into a fertility clinic in the first place. He never told you the real reason, did he? He never tells anyone the real reason." He smiled. "Ask him. And then come back and tell me he's the good man you think he is." Elena walked out on legs that held her exactly until she reached the car and then folded. She did not go home. She could not go home, could not sit in the apartment where Adrian's men were watching, could not think with that name ringing in her head. Ask him about the woman he loved before you and the child and what happened to them. Because Adrian had told her that very first week at the diner. She had asked him if he had children, and something had crossed his face like a shadow over water, and he had said no, and she had believed him because she read people for a living, and his no had been true. Except she was replaying it now the way she replayed testimony, and she realized his no had been true the way a lawyer's answer is true. She had asked, "Do you have children?" And he had said no. And maybe that was not a lie. Maybe the truth was that he had had a child and did not anymore, and that a man could say no to "Do you have children?" and mean "I lost one," and still be telling a kind of truth, the kind that hides everything inside a single honest word. She called him. She did not decide to. Her hands did it. "Elena." Relief and panic together. "Where are you? Your phone's been at your apartment for 6 hours and you're not there. My men lost you. I've been out of my mind. Where are you? Are you safe? Did you have a child before me?" Dead silence. "Adrian, I asked you a question. The first week at the diner, I asked you if you had children, and you said no. Was that true? Where are you?" His voice had changed. It was quiet now and afraid, and she had never heard Adrian Morelli afraid, not once, not even the night he told her about the war. "Elena, who have you been talking to? Tell me who you've been talking to. Answer my question first. Please tell me you didn't go to Declan." She didn't answer, and her silence was an answer, and she heard him make a sound like he'd been hit. "Oh God! Elena! Oh God, what did you do?" It wasn't anger. That was the terrible part. It was grief. Pure grief, a man watching the thing he loved walk toward a cliff. "You went to him. You went to him alone. Do you have any idea? Do you have the first idea what you just... He didn't touch me. I walked in and I walked out." And before I left, he told me to ask you about the woman you loved before me, and the child, and what happened to them, and why you really walked into that clinic. So I'm asking Adrian. I'm asking you now, and if you say import business, if you give me one more clean word that hides everything underneath it, I swear to God I will take this child and you will never— I had a son. Elena stopped breathing. I had a son, Adrian said again, and his voice was a thing coming apart. His name was Mateo. He'd be 4 now. He was— a sound. A terrible sound. There was a woman, Sophia. Years ago, before all of it got as bad as it got. I loved her. I actually loved her. Elena, the real thing, the once-in-a-life thing, and she got pregnant, and for about a year, I let myself believe I could have it a family, a normal life, a way out. And then my enemies found out about her the same way Declan found out about you. Because a man in my world who loves something has just handed the world a knife. Adrian, they came for her to get to me, and I wasn't there. I was doing what I always do. I was working. I was surviving, and I wasn't there. And by the time I got to them— He couldn't finish it. He tried 3 times and couldn't. Sophia died that night, and Mateo, my son. He was hurt badly, and he held on for 2 more days, and I sat in a hospital and held his hand, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't buy his life, or threaten his life back, or kill anybody hard enough to make him breathe all my power, and I sat there useless, while my little boy— He broke off. Elena sat in the back of a car with her hand pressed hard over her own mouth, tears running silently down her face, and understood finally all of it. That's why, she whispered. That's why you were at the clinic. They said I couldn't have children anymore. Adrian said, wrecked and quiet. After I lost him, I didn't want to live, and I did something to myself, it doesn't matter what, and afterward the doctor said the damage meant I'd probably never— He stopped. I went to that clinic to find out if it was true. If there was any chance left that I could ever be a father again. I wasn't there to help a friend. I lied about that too. I was there sitting in that waiting room trying to work up the nerve to ask a doctor if the one thing I'd destroyed in myself could ever be fixed. And then a woman sat down 2 seats away and asked me if I wanted children. Elena was crying openly now. You asked me if I wanted them, Adrian said, and I said I'd stopped letting myself want things. And that was the truest thing I have ever said to anyone, because the last time I wanted something, I wanted a family, and I got one, and the world killed it in a single night to punish me for being who I am. His voice dropped to almost nothing. And then you asked me to be a father. You, a stranger. You handed me the exact thing I'd gone to that clinic to find out I could never have again. Do you understand why I couldn't say no? Do you understand why I couldn't tell you the truth? Because the truth is that loving anything gets it killed. And I already knew that I'd already learned it in the worst way. A man can learn it, and I did it anyway. I let myself want you and the baby anyway. Because I'm weak and I'm selfish and I couldn't stand to lose the second chance. For a long time, neither of them said anything. There was only the sound of the car, and both of them breathing, 2 people a city apart, holding a phone like it was the only solid thing left. You should have told me, Elena finally said. And there was no anger left in it, only exhaustion, only grief. Not to protect me, because I deserved to know what I was choosing. You let me choose you, thinking you were a lonely man with a sad face. You were a man who'd already gotten 1 family killed by loving them. That's not a small thing to leave out, Adrian. That's the whole thing. That's everything. I know. I chose you because I thought I could read you. I thought I saw everything that mattered across that waiting room. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. And I did see it. That's what kills me. I saw a good man, and I was right. You are a good man. You're the most heartbroken good man I've ever met. But being good didn't save Sophia. Being good didn't save Mateo. Being a good man in your world is like being a good man standing in a burning house. It doesn't matter how good you are. The house still burns everyone in it. Her voice cracked. And I just moved my child into the house. Elena, I will not let anything happen to you. I swear on Mateo, I swear on my son's grave. You swore that before. The words were out before she could stop them, and she heard him take the blow, and she hated herself, and she said it anyway because it was true. You loved Sophia. I don't doubt that you loved her. And you weren't there. Not because you didn't love her enough, because your world doesn't care how much you love someone. It takes them anyway. That's the part you can't swear away, Adrian. You can't promise me safety. You've never been able to promise anyone safety. It's the one thing your power can't buy. The silence after that was the longest one yet. You're right, he said finally, and it was the most defeated she had ever heard a human being sound. You're right about all of it. So I'll say the thing I said before, and this time you'll believe me, because now you know why I mean it. He took a breath. Let me disappear you, both of you. I have the money, and I have the people, and I have the reach, and I will build you a life so far from me, and so completely clean, that Declan will never find a thread to pull, because there won't be a thread, because you'll never have known me. New name, new city, everything. And I will never come. I will never call. I will never, as long as I live, try to see my child, because the only thing I have left to give that baby is my absence. I killed one family by staying. I can save this one by leaving. His voice broke completely. Let me be the father who leaves Elena. It's the only kind of father I know how to be that doesn't get everyone killed. Let me love this baby the only safe way there is. From a distance, from nothing, from never. And Elena Whitmore sat in the back of a car with tears streaming down her face and her hand on her belly, and realized she was being offered by the most dangerous man in Chicago, the single most loving thing anyone had ever offered her. He was offering to erase himself. He was offering to spend the rest of his life alone, having a child in the world he would never be allowed to meet because he loved that child too much to be near it. It was the most beautiful and the most heartbreaking thing she had ever heard. And it was wrong. She knew it was wrong the same way she'd known there was a third door, the way she knew things in her body before she could explain them in words. Because Adrian had lived his entire life believing there were only two options, stay and get them killed or leave and lose them. And both of those were doors built by fear, and Elena did not solve things with fear. No, she said. Elena, no. I'm not disappearing. Listen to me. Listen. You've spent your whole life believing you only get two choices, and both of them end with you alone, because that's what your father taught you, and that's what losing Sophia confirmed, and that's the only story you know how to tell about yourself. Adrian. I have spent 15 years walking into rooms where everybody swears there are only two doors and finding the third one. It's the only thing I'm truly great at, and there's a third door here. I've been staring at it for 3 days. There's no... Declan doesn't want money. He doesn't want territory. I sat across from him, and I watched him, and I know exactly what he wants. And it's the one thing that makes him beatable, because a man who wants a specific thing can be steered, and Declan wants one thing only. She wiped her eyes, and her voice was hard and clear. Now the trial voice, the voice that had never lost. He wants you to feel what he felt. He wants you to lose someone the way he lost his brother. That's the whole engine of him. It's not power. It's grief that turned into a machine. And a machine, Adrian. A machine you can take apart if you understand how it's built. I understand how he's built. I sat across from him for 20 minutes, and I understand him better than his own people do, because that's my job. That's the thing I do that you can't. The thing all your guns and all your men can't do. What are you saying? I'm saying stop trying to protect me and start letting me help you, Elena said. You keep offering to disappear me because you think the only two people in this war are you and Declan, two dangerous men who solve things with fear. But there are 3 people in this war now. And the third one is a woman who has never lost a case, who walked into that man's restaurant and walked back out, and who just spent 20 minutes learning the exact shape of what he wants. You've been treating me like the thing you're fighting over. Stop it. I'm not the prize, Adrian. I'm the lawyer, and I'm going to win this. There was a long silence, and then Adrian said in a voice full of something she had not heard from him before, something like awe and terror, and a fragile, dangerous thing that might have been hope. You are the most terrifying person I have ever met, and I have met terrifying people for a living. Good, Elena said. You should be a little afraid of me. Everyone who ever underestimated me learned to be. If we do this, if we don't run, you understand what it means. It means the danger is real, and it stays real until Declan is dealt with one way or another. It means I can't promise you the ending. I've never been able to promise anyone the ending. I don't need you to promise me the ending, Elena said. I've been in front of juries for 15 years. Nobody ever promised me the ending. You don't get the ending by praying for it. You get it by outthinking the other side. She looked out at the city that was afraid of the wrong person. Now come get me. I'm at a diner on the south side, and I've been talking to you in a parked car for an hour, and I'm 5 months pregnant, and I'm exhausted, and I want to sit across a table from you and plan how we're going to take Declan Kavanaugh apart. And Adrian. She paused. No more clean words. No more import business. From here on out, you tell me everything the second you know it. That's my only condition. It's the same condition you gave me the first night. Eyes open. Both of us. Or there's no deal. Eyes open, Adrian said, and she heard him almost smile through the wreckage. Both of us. He came and got her. And when he walked into that diner and saw her sitting in a corner booth, alive and safe and furious and magnificent, this man who had lost one family and offered to lose the memory of another to keep her safe, Adrian Morelli stopped in the doorway like a man who could not believe what he was allowed to have. She looked up at him. Her eyes were red, and her face was streaked, and her hand was on her belly. "Sit down," she said. "You're buying 2 coffees you're not going to drink, and I'm going to tell you how we win." He sat down. He ordered 2 coffees. He drank neither. And for the first time in 20 years, the most dangerous man in Chicago was not the most dangerous person at the table, and he knew it. And something in his ruined heart, something that had been dead since a hospital room 4 years ago, cracked all the way open and let in a terrible, unfamiliar light. But across the city, Declan Kavanaugh set down his own phone, on which a man had just reported that Elena Whitmore had met Adrian Morelli at a South Side diner, the two of them talking low and close over a table, like people making a plan. "So she told him," Declan said softly. "And he didn't run. Interesting." He turned to his brother. "She's not going to disappear. She's going to fight. His woman thinks she can fight me." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who had just watched his trap close a little tighter. Because a target that runs is hard to catch, but a target that stays and fights walks toward you on its own. Let her come. Let her plan. It's so much sweeter when they think they have a chance. He stood. "Move up the timeline. I don't want to wait for the baby anymore. I want him to lose her while she's still carrying it. I want him to lose both at once the way I lost everything at once." He buttoned his coat. "Find out where she'll be. And this time, we don't watch." And in the diner across a scarred table, Elena Whitmore laid out a plan with the precision of the best lawyer in Chicago, and Adrian Morelli listened and felt hope, and neither of them knew that the man they were planning against had just stopped being patient. The waiting was over. And the one thing Elena's plan had counted on, the one pillar the whole thing stood on, was that Declan Kavanaugh would keep waiting for the perfect moment. He wasn't going to wait anymore. The plan Elena built over the next 3 days was not a plan a man like Adrian would ever have thought of, because it did not involve a single gun. And that was exactly why she believed in it. "You keep wanting to solve this by making him afraid," she told Adrian, spreading her legal pad across the diner table. "You can't. He's already lost the thing he was most afraid of losing. His brother's dead. You can't threaten a man who's already been through the worst thing. Fear only works on people who still have something to lose. Everybody has something to lose. Not Declan. That's what makes him dangerous, and it's also the one crack in him." She tapped the pad. "A man who's already lost everything isn't fighting to protect something. He's fighting because the fighting is the only thing that keeps the grief from swallowing him. Take away the fight, and there's nothing left but a man alone in a room with the brother he couldn't save. That's what he's actually terrified of. Not you." Silence. Adrian stared at her. "How do you know that?" "Because I watched him," Elena said simply. "For 20 minutes. And because I've been that person. After my divorce, after the fertility stuff, there was a stretch where I kept fighting things, kept taking impossible cases, kept picking fights. I didn't need, and it took me a long time to understand I wasn't doing it to win. I was doing it so I wouldn't have to sit still and feel what had happened to me. Declan's doing the same thing. He's just doing it with a body count. She laid it out. It was intricate and it was legal, and it terrified Adrian more than any gunfight ever had because it required him to do the one thing he had never done in 20 years. It required him to make himself vulnerable on purpose. "You want me to give him a way to win," Adrian said, slowly reading the pad. "You want me to offer him the thing he actually wants and let him think he's beaten me." "I want you to give him the truth," Elena said, "which is that you already lost. You lost Matteo. You lost Sofia. You've spent every day for 4 years drowning in exactly the grief he's drowning in, and the only difference between you and Declan is that he still thinks hurting you will make his hurt smaller. You know it won't. You've had 4 years to learn it doesn't." She looked at him. "You're going to sit across from him and you're not going to threaten him, and you're not going to bring men, and you're going to tell him the truth about what it did to you when they took your son. And you're going to watch what happens to a man built entirely out of revenge when the person he's trying to destroy turns out to already be destroyed. That's not a plan, that's suicide." "It's not suicide because I'll be 3 moves ahead of it," Elena said. "The confession is the front of the house. It's what he sees. While he's looking at that, I'll be building the back of the house, the part that actually holds. Legal exposure, financial exposure, the kind of quiet, patient, paper-based ruin that a man like Declan never sees coming because he's spent his whole life watching for guns. I'm going to do to him what your whole world can't. I'm going to make him small. Legally, permanently. In a way no bullet ever could." She sat back. "Your job is to keep his eyes on your grief. My job is to take him apart while he's not looking." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and then he said the thing that told her something had changed in him. "And if it doesn't work, if I sit across from him with no men and no gun, and he just decides to end it right there, then you'll have died the way you should have lived," Elena said gently. "Honest, in the open, not hiding behind clean words. But it's going to work, Adrian, because I don't lose. And because for the first time in your life, you're not going to fight this alone." He reached across the table and took her hand, and it was the first time either of them had touched on purpose, and neither of them pulled away. "I have to tell you something," he said, "and it's not about the plan." "Tell me." I stepped out. His voice was rough. "This week, while you were building this, I made calls I've been putting off for 4 years. I'm out, Elena. The docs, the operations, the whole thing. I've been handing it off to Vincent piece by piece for 3 days. I told myself I was doing it to make me a smaller target. That's what I told Vince." He looked at their joined hands. "But that's another clean word. The truth is, I looked at you sitting across from me building a way to save my child with nothing but a legal pad and your own 2 hands, and I realized I've spent 20 years being powerful, and it never once protected the people I loved. You've done more to keep this baby safe in 3 days with a pen than I did for Sofia and Matteo with an entire empire." He raised his eyes. "I don't want the empire. I never wanted it. My father handed it to me, and I took it because taking it was the only way to survive him, and I've been surviving ever since. I'm done surviving. I want to live. I want to be there when the baby comes. I want to drink one of these coffees for once." A broken laugh. "I want a life so ordinary, it would embarrass every man who's ever been afraid of me." Elena's eyes filled. "You know it's not that simple. You don't just walk out of your world." "No," Adrian agreed. "You don't. There's a price. Vincent's warned me about it every day this week. When a man like me steps back, the wolves come because they smell it. I'm weaker now than I've been in 20 years, right at the exact moment Declan's most dangerous. I know that. I did it anyway." He squeezed her hand. "Because a strong man who gets everyone he loves killed is worth less than a weak man who's actually there. I finally understand that. It cost me a son to understand it. I'm not going to waste the lesson." And that was the moment Elena stopped being afraid of loving him. Not because the danger was gone. The danger was worse than ever. But because she finally understood that the man across from her was not choosing her out of the mafia boss's need to possess. He was choosing her the way a man chooses to walk out of a burning house he was born in, knowing the fire might follow him, knowing it might kill him anyway, and walking out regardless because a life that ends in the open is worth more than a life that continues in the flames. "Okay," she whispered. "Then let's finish this, so you can drink your coffee." They set the meeting for Thursday. Neutral ground, a warehouse office Vincent controlled swept and safe, and Elena spent the 2 days before it working the back of the house exactly as she'd promised. Quiet calls to quiet people, a forensic accountant she trusted with her life, a federal contact she'd built over 15 years of clean work, laying the paper trail that would strangle Declan Kavanaugh long after the meeting was done. But the thing about a plan built on one assumption is that it lives or dies by that assumption. And Elena's assumption was that Declan would keep waiting for the perfect moment. He had already stopped. It happened on Wednesday, the day before the meeting. And it happened because Elena, for the first time in 3 days, let her guard down for 1 hour. She had a doctor's appointment, a routine 6 months now, and she'd been to it a dozen times, and she told Adrian's men not to come inside because she was tired of being watched during the most private moments of her life, and she walked the 50 feet from the car to the clinic door alone the way she had a dozen times before. Except this time, a van was parked where no van should have been, and the 50 feet was 50 feet too far, and by the time Adrian's man understood what he was seeing, it was already happening. They didn't hurt her. That was the calculation, cold and precise. The calculation of a man who had spent 8 years being patient and had decided at last that patient was over. They took her clean and fast and gone, and they left one thing behind on the pavement where she'd been standing, a single sheet of paper, and on it in Declan Kavanaugh's own hand 5 words. "Now you know how it feels." Adrian got the call at 2:14 in the afternoon. Vincent's voice had never once in 20 years sounded the way it sounded now. "Boss, they have her. Declan has Elena." The world stopped. For 1 full second, Adrian Morelli was not in his body. He was in a hospital room 4 years ago, holding a small hand, watching a monitor, useless, powerless, all his empire worth nothing against the one thing that mattered. He was back in the exact center of the worst moment of his life, and the grief that had never fully left him rose up like black water and tried to pull him under. And he heard a voice in his own head, his father's voice saying, "This is what love costs a man like you. I told you, this is always what it costs." And then from somewhere another voice, Elena's voice. "You keep wanting to solve this by making him afraid. You can't. Fear only works on people who still have something to lose." Adrian came back into his body. "Where?" he said. And his voice was not the black water, and it was not his father. It was something new, something that had been born in a diner over coffee he never drank. It was calm, terribly, lethally calm. "We don't know yet. The van's gone, but boss..." Vincent hesitated. "There's a message. He left a note. He wants you to come to him, alone, no men. He's naming a place and a time tonight, and he says, if he sees one single soldier, if he even smells one, Vincent couldn't say it. He says he'll make you watch." And there it was. The trap sprung. Declan had taken Elena's own plan and turned it inside out. She had wanted Adrian to walk in alone and vulnerable and honest. Declan had made walking in alone the only way to keep her alive. He had given Adrian exactly the meeting Elena wanted and made it a death sentence. "Boss," Vincent said, "you can't go alone. It's a kill box. He's not going to make a deal. He's going to put you both in the ground. That's the whole point. That's been the whole point since the beginning. If you walk in there alone, I lose you, and I lose her, and I lose the baby all in one night. Let me put men in. Quiet. He'll never." "He'll know," Adrian said. "He always knows. That's not how we win this." "Then how do we win it?" And Adrian Morelli did the thing that no one who had feared him for 20 years would have believed. He sat down in the middle of the worst moment since the hospital, and he made himself think, because a woman had taught him that thinking was stronger than fear, and he was not going to waste the lesson while she was counting on him to remember it. "We don't win it with men," Adrian said slowly. "Elena was right about everything. We can't beat him with force. He's not afraid of force." But she built a second plan, Vince. The back of the house, the paper. She's been building a legal and financial noose around Declan's whole operation for 3 days, and it doesn't need her in the room to tighten. Get me everything she was working on. The accountant, the federal contact. All of it. Right now. How does that help her tonight? It doesn't, Adrian said. Tonight I do it her way. I go in alone and I go in honest, and I make it real because it is real, because I would trade my life for hers without a single second of thought. And that's not a tactic, Vince. That's just true. But I go in knowing that even if he kills me, the thing she built still strangles him. Even if I die in that room, Elena wins. Her plan wins. Declan spends the rest of his life in a federal cell, losing everything one paper at a time, and my child grows up safe because the mother built a wall that outlived the father. His voice caught just once, and then steadied. That's the deal I'm making. My life for hers. And her mind reaching out of that room to finish him even if I can't. Adrian, please. Send me the location, Adrian said. And Vincent. He paused. 20 years. You never once questioned me when it mattered. Don't start tonight. If I don't walk out of there, you make sure every single thing she built lands on Declan Kavanaugh. You make sure she and the baby are safe and rich and free for the rest of their lives. You promise me that, and then you let me go do the one worthwhile thing I've ever done. The silence on the line was a man breaking. I promise, Vincent said. Elena woke in a room she didn't know with her hands bound and her heart pounding, and immediately automatically both palms flat against her belly, checking feeling until she felt the small insistent movement that meant the baby was all right, and only then did she let herself breathe. Declan Kavanaugh sat across from her in a chair watching patient again, now that he had what he wanted. The baby's fine, he said. I'm not a monster, whatever your Adrian's told you. Nobody laid a hand on you. You were carried like glass. He leaned forward. I've done a great many terrible things, Elena. I've never hurt a child. That's the line even I don't cross. Which is more than I can say for the man who fathered yours. He didn't kill children. No, Declan agreed. He killed brothers. He killed my brother, and he made me into this. And now he's going to walk into a room tonight to trade himself for you, and I'm going to let him. And then I'm going to do the one thing that finishes it. His eyes were wet again, that terrible grief machine grinding behind them. I'm going to let you both live. Elena went still. That surprises you. Declan smiled without any joy in it at all. You thought I'd kill him. Kill you. No. I thought about it for 8 years, killing him. And you know what I finally understood sitting across from you in that restaurant, watching you be so sharp and so alive and so his. Killing him would be a mercy. He wants to die. He's wanted to die since his boy did. I can see it on him, everyone can. Death would be a gift. He leaned close. So I'm going to do to him what nobody did to me. I'm going to let him live, and I'm going to take you, not kill you, take you, make you disappear so completely, you and the child both, that he spends the rest of his life exactly like I've spent mine. Knowing you're out there somewhere, never finding you, never knowing. That's the balance, Elena, not a death, a haunting. I'm going to make him into me. And Elena Whitmore, bound and taken and 6 months pregnant, looked at the man across from her and felt underneath her terror a single cold spark of something she recognized. Because he had just told her exactly what he wanted. And a man who tells you exactly what he wants has just handed you the map to beating him. You've thought about this for 8 years, she said, and her voice was steadier than it had any right to be. Every day, you've built the whole thing in your head, the perfect revenge, the haunting, instead of the killing. You've lived inside it. She tilted her head. Can I tell you what happens the day after you do it, Declan? I've watched 100 men get the revenge they spent years building. I do it for a living. I watch people win the thing they thought would fix them. You want to know what happens the next morning? Enlighten me. Nothing, Elena said softly. That's what happens. Nothing. The grief is still there. Your brother is still dead. The hole in you is exactly the same size it was the day before, because it was never Adrian-shaped. It was brother-shaped, and no amount of anything you do to Adrian will ever fit that hole. You'll have spent 8 years and everything you have to arrive at. The exact morning you're trying to escape. Except now you'll have nothing left to plan. No fight left to hide inside. Just you and the silence and the brother you couldn't save. I'm not threatening you, Declan. I'm the only person who's ever going to tell you the truth. The revenge doesn't end the grief. It ends the distraction. And then you're alone with it forever. For the first time, Declan Kavanaugh's face changed. And in a warehouse office across the city, as the clock crept toward the hour of the meeting, Adrian Morelli put on a plain dark coat, and he carried no gun, and he took no men. And before he walked out the door, he stopped and looked at Vincent and said one last thing. If this works, it won't be because of me. It'll be because of her. She figured out how to beat a man with the truth. I spent 20 years thinking the truth was the one weapon I couldn't afford. He almost smiled. Turns out it was the only one that ever could have saved anybody. He walked out into the night to trade his life for the woman who had taught him at the very end how to stop being afraid. And neither of them, not Adrian. Walking toward the trap, not Elena working on the broken man in front of her, knew that the other one had at the exact same hour in 2 rooms across a city arrived at the very same weapon. Not force. The truth. And whether the truth would be enough to beat a man who had built his entire life out of grief, or whether Elena's own plan had just delivered the two of them straight into the ending Declan had spent 8 years designing, would come down to the next few hours, and to a question neither Adrian nor Elena could answer, as they walked separately toward the same dark room. Which was stronger? A lifetime of revenge? Or 2 people who had finally too late, or just in time, learned how to stop being afraid of the truth? Adrian walked into the room alone, and the first thing he saw was Elena alive, bound to a chair, but unhurt, her hand still resting on her belly, and something in his chest that had been clenched since 2:14 that afternoon, finally unclenched, even as everything else in him went cold and ready. You came alone, Declan said from the shadows. I'm almost impressed. I had 3 men checking the perimeter. They found nothing. 20 years of an empire, and you walked in here like a man with nothing left to lose. I don't have anything left to lose, Adrian said. That's what you never understood, Declan. You've been hunting me for 8 years like I was a rich man you could bankrupt, but I lost everything worth having 4 years ago. You're not the first person to take my family, you're just the second. Adrian, don't, Elena said quietly. No, she's right, there's no more clean words. Adrian did not look away from Declan. You want to hear about your brother? I'll tell you the truth, the whole truth, and I've never said it out loud to anyone. Yes, I killed him, 8 years ago. And I told myself for 8 years that it was business, that it was war, that it was him or me, and that's true. But it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is, I was good at it. I was good at killing Declan, because my father made me good at it before I was old enough to know there was another way to be. And your brother died because I was the thing my father built, and I'm not going to stand here and pretend I was justified because I wasn't, and you deserve to hear that from the man who did it. His voice was steady and terrible. I took your brother, and I have carried it every day, and I am sorry. Not sorry enough to bring him back because nothing is ever enough for that. But sorry. That's the truth. That's what you've been waiting 8 years to hear, and here it is, and I'm betting my life and hers that it's the only thing that was ever going to be enough, because a bullet from you was never going to fix you, Declan. Only this was. The room was silent. Declan Kavanaugh stepped forward, and there was a gun in his hand, and his face was a war between 8 years of rehearsed revenge and something he had not planned for, which was the sound of the man he hated telling him the exact truth he had needed and never expected to get. You think an apology buys her back, Declan said, and his voice was not steady anymore. No, Adrian said. I don't think anything buys her back. I think you're going to make a choice in the next 30 seconds, and I can't control it. And for the first time in my life, I've made my peace with not being able to control something. If you shoot me, shoot me. But let her go. She's got nothing to do with your brother. She's a woman who chose a stranger in a waiting room because she wanted to be a mother, and she had no idea what she was choosing, and the only crime she ever committed was seeing something good in me that I didn't deserve. Take your revenge on me. I'm the one who earned it. Let her raise the child. Let there be one person in this whole bloody story who comes out of it clean. Adrian! Elena's voice broke. Stop offering to die. Stop it. It's not offering to die, he said, and he finally looked at her and his eyes were full. It's the first honest thing I've ever gotten to do. Loving you out loud in a room with nothing to protect me. Do you know, I've never done that. Not once in my whole life. I loved Sophia in secret because I thought secret was safe, and it got her killed. I'm not doing it that way again, so I'm going to say it here in front of the man who might kill me for it. I love you, Elena. I love the child. And if the last thing I do is stand in a room and say it out loud where everyone can hear, then it's still the best thing I ever did. And Elena Whitmore, bound to a chair, looked at the man who had walked unarmed into a trap to say the words he'd spent his whole life too afraid to say. And she stopped being a lawyer, stopped being 3 moves ahead, stopped being the sharpest mind in the room and simply said through her tears, I love you too, you impossible man. Now please don't die, because I did not fall in love with a corpse. I fell in love with a father, and your child needs one. Declan Kavanaugh stood between them with a gun in his hand, and something was happening to his face that had not happened in 8 years. You, he said to Elena hoarse. You told me the truth would still be there. In the morning. After. That the grief would still be my brother's shape, and nothing I did to him would fill it. The gun wavered. You said the revenge doesn't end the grief, it ends the distraction. And then, I'm alone with it. I did, Elena said gently. Because it's true. I've watched it 100 times. And Declan, look at what's in front of you. A man who took your brother telling you the truth and apologizing and offering you his life. That's the most revenge you were ever going to get. That's the ceiling. That's as good as it was ever going to feel. And you can already tell, can't you? You can already feel that it doesn't fill it. Even now. Even with the gun in your hand. The hole is still exactly the same size. The gun lowered an inch, then another. If you shoot him, Elena said, you'll have the same morning I told you about. Alone with your brother's shape forever. Except now with 2 more ghosts. Mine and the baby's. And you told me yourself you've never hurt a child. So you won't do that. Which means you shoot only him and you let me go. And I promise you, Declan, on my child's life, I promise you that the next morning is the emptiest you will ever feel, because you'll have finally used up the last thing you had to look forward to, and there will be nothing left in the world but the fact that your brother is gone, and always will be. Her voice was almost tender now. Or you put the gun down, and you let this be the day the war ended, instead of the day it got 2 people bigger. You've been a soldier for 8 years, Declan. Aren't you tired? Doesn't every part of you just want to be done? And Declan Kavanaugh, who had built his entire life out of grief, who had waited 8 years for this exact room, began to shake. I was supposed to protect him, he whispered, and it was not to either of them, it was to a brother who wasn't there. I was the older one. I was supposed to. His face crumpled. He was 26. He was 26 years old, and I let him go to that meeting, and I've spent 8 years telling myself if I just made it hurt enough for the man who... The gun was pointing at the floor now. But it never hurts him enough. There's no enough. You're right. God help me, you're right, there's no enough. There was never going to be enough. I built my whole life out of chasing a thing that doesn't exist. Declan, Elena said softly, put it down. He looked at the gun in his hand like he didn't recognize it. And then, slowly, the most feared man on the other side of the city, the patient spider who had waited 8 years, set the gun down on the table and put his face in his hands and wept for a brother that no amount of revenge had ever been able to bring back. Adrian did not move. He stood very still, understanding that something more dangerous than any gunfight was happening, that a man was coming apart in front of him, and that the wrong word now could put the whole thing back together in the shape of murder. It was Elena who spoke. "Untie me, Declan. I'm 6 months pregnant, and my hands are asleep, and I think we've all had enough for one lifetime." And he did. The man who had taken her crossed the room and untied her hands gently, the way he'd promised he'd carried her, and when her hands came free, she did not run, and she did not reach for the gun. She reached up, and she put one hand on the side of Declan Kavanaugh's face, the way you'd touch someone at a funeral, and she said, "Get help, not from anyone in your world, real help, the kind that lets you put your brother down instead of carrying him. There's a whole life on the other side of this. I've watched people find it. You can too. But not with a gun in your hand, and not with your brother's shape running your whole life." Declan Kavanaugh looked at her like she was speaking a language he'd forgotten he knew. "Why?" he said. "Why would you of all people?" "Because I'm about to be a mother," Elena said. "And the first thing I want to teach my child is that the person who hurt you isn't always a monster. Sometimes he's just somebody who never got to put his own grief down. And that you can hate what a person did and still refuse to become it." She stood, one hand on her belly, steady on her feet. "You didn't kill us tonight, Declan. Remember that. When it's dark, when the grief comes for you, you remember that at the very end, you were a man who put the gun down. That's yours now. Nobody can take it." They walked out of that room together, Adrian and Elena alive, and behind them a broken man sat alone with the first honest grief he'd allowed himself in 8 years. And it was not a victory anyone cheered because it was too sad and too human for that. But it was, in the deepest sense of the word, the end of the war. Vincent was waiting outside with a dozen men and a face gray with fear that turned at the sight of them into something close to collapse. "You're alive. You're both how? How are you both?" "She talked him out of it," Adrian said. "Same as she said she would, with the truth." He pulled Elena into him, careful of the belly, and held her the way a man holds the thing he was sure he'd lost, and over her shoulder he said, "It's over, Vince, all of it. The Kavanaughs, the war, the whole thing, and me. I'm out, for real this time, tonight." "Boss?" "Adrian," he said. "Just Adrian. I'm done being anybody's boss." The paper trail Elena had built never had to strangle Declan Kavanaugh, because a broken man who has finally set down his brother does not have the strength to run an empire. And the Kavanaugh operation dissolved quietly over the following months, its pieces drifting away. Its patient spider gone somewhere no one followed. Some said he'd left the city. One rumor, the one Elena chose to believe, said he'd checked himself into a facility upstate and was, for the first time in 8 years, learning how to grieve instead of how to hunt. She never confirmed it. She didn't need to. She'd done her part. What a man did with the door she'd opened was his to decide. 3 months later, Elena Whitmore went into labor at 4 in the morning, and Adrian Morelli, who had faced down guns without flinching, nearly passed out twice in the hallway and had to be sat down by a nurse and told to breathe. "You're worse than the mothers," the nurse said. "I've never done this," Adrian said, ashen. "I had a son. I never got to do this part. I got the ending. I never got the beginning." The nurse's face softened. "Well, you're getting it now. So pull yourself together, Dad. She needs you in there." "Dad." He stood outside the door, and he heard it, that word, the word he had buried in a hospital 4 years ago and never once let himself hope for again. And he thought about a waiting room and a woman who sat down 2 seats away and asked him if he wanted children. And he thought about how he had said he'd stopped letting himself want things. He didn't stop wanting things anymore. He had learned at last that the wanting was the whole point. That a man who wants nothing has already died and just forgot to fall down. He went into the room. He held Elena's hand. And when their daughter came into the world at 6:47 in the morning with a cry that was exactly as he'd said it would be, little and fast, Adrian Morelli, the most feared man Chicago had ever produced, put his forehead against Elena's and wept. And this time he did not turn away so she wouldn't see. He let her see. He'd learned that too. "She's here," Elena whispered, exhausted and radiant. She's really here. She's here, Adrian said. What do we call her? Elena had thought about this for months, and she'd never told him, and she told him now. Sophia, she said. If that's all right. For the woman who taught you how to love, so that you'd know how by the time you got to us. She's part of why our daughter has a father who knows what he's doing. It felt wrong to leave her out of the story. And Adrian Morelli, who had lost a woman named Sophia and a son named Matteo, and had believed for 4 years that loving anything was the same as killing it, held his daughter and heard her name and understood that he had been wrong about the deepest thing a man can be wrong about. Love had not killed his family. The world had. And love was the only thing that had ever even once brought anything back. Sophia, he said, and the name did not break him. It healed something. Sophia Whitmore. Morelli, Elena corrected. Sophia Whitmore Morelli. If you'll have us. Both names. The whole complicated truth of it. No clean words. No clean words, he agreed, and he laughed wet and amazed. You know what this means. You're stuck with me now. I fully intend to be the most boring man in Chicago. I'm going to coach a soccer team. I'm going to burn dinner. I'm going to be at every single appointment and every school play, and I'm going to embarrass this child until the day I die of natural causes at a very old age in a very ordinary bed. That, Elena said, is the most dangerous thing you've ever threatened anyone with. Adrian Morelli did become the most boring man in Chicago, and he wore it like the crown he'd never wanted the first time. He cooked breakfast badly every morning. He learned to drink coffee and discovered he liked it, and laughed every single time at the years he'd spent letting it go cold in front of people just to seem like a man who couldn't be touched. He was touched constantly now. By a daughter who fell asleep on his enormous chest. By a woman who read him like a book she'd already decided to love. The city that had feared his name slowly forgot it, the way a city forgets everything, and that suited him perfectly, because a man who is forgotten by his enemies is finally free to be remembered by his family. He and Elena married in a courthouse with Grace and Vincent as witnesses, and no announcement, and no empire, and no fear. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Adrian looked around the small plain room at the handful of people who loved them and thought about how he'd spent 20 years in rooms full of people who were afraid of him, and how he'd trade every single one of those rooms for this one. And he almost laughed out loud from the sheer relief of it. Elena had gone looking for a perfect stranger, a paragraph on a screen, a clean arrangement with no feelings and no complications and no risk. She had been so certain that was what she wanted, so certain that the safe thing and the planned thing and the controlled thing was the way to build a life. Instead, she had chosen an imperfect man in a waiting room, a man carrying more darkness and more grief than she could have imagined, a man whose truth nearly cost her everything. And in choosing him, she had found the one thing her careful, controlled, perfectly planned life had never once given her, which was a person who would walk unarmed into a room and die for her, and then, having been given the chance to live, instead spend every ordinary day proving he'd meant it. Years later, when Sophia was old enough to ask where she came from, Elena would tell her the true version softened only where a child needed softening. That her mother had once believed the safest way to build a family was to plan every piece of it and let no one in. That her father had once believed that loving anything was the same as losing it, and that the two of them had been wrong in exactly opposite ways, and had somehow, against everything, met in the middle and taught each other the thing neither one could learn alone. Because in the end, no one was saved by fixing the past. Adrian could not undo what he'd done, and Elena could not unchoose the danger she'd walked into. And Declan could not bring his brother back, and none of them got the clean version of anything. What saved them was not the erasing of what they'd been. It was being seen all the way to the bottom by someone who looked at the worst of them and chose to believe in the person they could still become. Elena had seen a good man behind a monster's reputation, and she had been right. Adrian had seen a family behind a lawyer's careful walls, and he had been right. And even Declan at the very end had been seen by the one person with every reason to hate him, and had been offered a door instead of a grave. Elena Whitmore went to a clinic to choose a stranger, and she walked out having chosen the truth. And the truth was harder and darker and more frightening than any clean arrangement she could have planned. It was also the only thing that ever turned two lonely, guarded, half-destroyed people into a family. She had wanted a perfect stranger. She had been given an imperfect man who was willing to burn his whole world down and build a smaller, truer, more ordinary one in its place, for a child he never expected, and a woman who saw him before he knew there was anything left worth seeing. And of everything Elena Whitmore ever won in a lifetime of never losing that imperfect, honest, hard-won family was the only verdict that ever truly mattered.